Hey, I'm Chase with VGHL, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Ben Wander, maker of A Case of Distrust.
So this game just came out, pretty recently. It's been getting some, pretty great reviews. That's why I wanted to come over and talk to you. So how does it feel to have this game, finally come out and just getting some, nice reviews?
So good. I'm so relaxed now. I have a chance to sleep. It's fantastic. It's really good. No, the critical reception has been heartwarming, honestly. I've been working on this for 2.5 years, so to have it finally come out, it's kind of like my baby, you know? It's been so long in development. To have people really into it is fantastic.
The first thing that grabbed my attention for this game was the style of how it how the story unfolds around you and how all the transitions feel almost like envelopes being pulled back to the characters and stuff. It's one of the coolest things, and I think it'll grab everyone's attention. How'd you come up with that style for the game?
Yeah, so a big influence was a guy named Saul Bass, who's a poster designer from the 1950s and 60s, and he also did a lot of movie credits. And the credit sequences are kind of where the transitions are taken from. So he did a lot of really neat stuff with opening a box and then suddenly a head pops out of the box, or some interesting stuff like that, that eventually made it into cheesy word art, PowerPoint presentations. But back then looked really cool, and I kind of tried to go back to that and see what was interesting about it and bring it into a video game.
And then obviously the second thing would be the setting. It's set in 1924, correct?
Yeah, wow, you got it.
Yeah. And one of the things, why'd you want to pick this setting, and how'd you do your research for it to make it feel very authentic?
Yeah, for sure. So the 1920s in general, I think, are really interesting. It's the start of a lot of technologies. Radio, automobile, flying was really first becoming a thing then too. It was the age of jazz, it was the age of new music, and also in the US it was the age of prohibition. So there's a lot of gray area in there. Are gangsters really bad if all they're doing is breaking a law that nobody wants to follow anyway? So there's all these really interesting elements of who's who and what's bad and what's good. That's just a really amazing era to me, and a place that I don't think people are that familiar with. It's kind of far enough away that it's foreign, but it's close enough that the themes still resonate. So for research, I researched San Francisco a lot, took a lot of pictures of the area, went around the city a ton, and went to the library. The library is the hidden secret of every city. Those librarians are fantastic. They know everything. Just talking to them, they could point me to old newspapers from the period. I learned when every building was built in San Francisco and for what purpose. I learned what was happening with the sports teams, what was happening with, the culture, what was happening with, again, things like the automobile and the radio. That stuff worked out really, really well. Go visit your public library.
As a history major, that warms my heart to a very hard degree. One of I think the really cool things is a very noir style setting. What did you pull influences from to make this story your own and not one of another bunch of noir films that have come out before?
Yeah, so I took a look at a lot of hard-boiled books, especially a lot of Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler stuff, and those books are great. I mean, I really like all of them, but if you look especially at the characters, anyone who's not a tall white male isn't really a character at all. They're all kind of caricatures. So my thought process was, what if I took something like that and flipped it on its head? What if the characters were actually different people in that time period, and how would that change it and how would that affect it? And the more I was doing research about it, the more I learned about the black and white divide in America in the 1920s. That gets sort of swept under the rug, but was there. About emancipation of women and how that was lauded as a great thing, but obviously women weren't completely equal and still aren't. And so things like that, of looking at the period through today's modern lens, really change a little bit of how the game is perceived and make it a more interesting story, I think, to tell in our time period.
And one of the really cool things I think is the actual gameplay is finding contradictions through other people's story and stuff. And how did you find the balance for that with not making the story overly difficult, too hard to follow, but also not making the story just so simple it's oh, this goes to that? What was how was that balance being found?
Yeah, so the game took 2.5 years. So it took a while. That was definitely the longest part, right? It's just getting a lot of people to play test it, seeing where they're stuck and why, trying to drop important hints. Different, even small things like he grinned versus he smiled, or he sneered versus he, laughed or something. They're little cues for people to understand, okay, maybe this guy's telling a lie, maybe he's not, whatever. And then having really obvious points of hints in the game. So there's a bartender in the game that you can go to and talk to, and he'll give you kind of hints, information, you chat with him and stuff. And having that really open and obvious to the player is another way to make sure that, hey, if you're stuck at a particular point, you can, in the story, go get some help.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. This has been Chase from VGHL, and back to the show.